Okay, all right, let's start. So, what is the zero-knowledge proof? We have two entities. On the left, we have Alice. She's a prover. And on the right, we have Bob. He's a verifier. And what's the aim of this interaction here? Alice, the prover, wants to convince Bob that something is true. For instance, we have the statement that Fermat's last theorem is true. And she would like to convince Bob of this fact. And she wants to do it in such a way that Bob is fully convinced. He knows that this is true, but he doesn't know anything else. And that's the zero-knowledge property. There are two key properties here. The first one is soundness, that Bob should not be convinced of any false statements. And the second one is zero-knowledge, that he should not learn anything else except for this fact. Okay? So, he knows it's true, he believes it, but he doesn't know what. So let's illustrate this. Before illustrating that, the key reason why this is so intriguing is that we can actually do it, and we can do it for everything that is provable. So everything that I can convince you of, I can convince you in zero-knowledge. So this notion of zero-knowledge was introduced by Goldwasser, Micali, and Rakov, and this amazing theorem was showed by Goldwasser, Micali, and Dickinson. All right. So here is my first little example. This is my friend Waldo, and he's here somewhere. Apparently, actually, I've lost him personally, so this part of the presentation will be slightly flawed. But if you can find him, do let me know. You have that's your challenge now. You have a few seconds. Sorry. Anyway, let's assume that I know where the guy is. Okay, and I'd like to convince you of the fact that I know where he is. So how should I do that? Okay. Well, one way is I show you. This is where he is. It's not in the wrong color, obviously, but that will reveal everything, right? So it spoils the game. So how can I convince you that I know where he is, right, without telling you where he is? Well, this is one very nice approach. I take a big piece of paper, much, much bigger than this thing, and I cut out a hole, just the size of Waldo's head. Okay? And then I spin this thing around, and then eventually I make it end so that his head is sticking out. Right? Now at this point, you know that the guy is there, so it's sound. I've convinced you, but you have no idea where he is. So when I then pull it apart, that's it. Right? Do you agree?
Yes. No, you could have switched the paper.
I could have cheated maybe, but like you come in the beginning of time, I'm standing there, I don't have anything else, I pick it, I just have these two things in my hands, and I do it. All right, so good, now you know where the guy is. Okay, so why convince you? Because, you know, I only held these two things, so it's sound. And then you didn't learn anything from this thing. So that's one instance. Let's now move on to something slightly more sophisticated and more interesting, because this is actually a problem that's NP complete. So using this, if you can give a proof that for this particular thing, you can give a proof for anything also. So what is this? Here is a Sudoku puzzle. You all know how it works, Sudoku? Okay, I need to put in all these numbers from 1 to 9 in every box here, such that on every line like this, like that, all the numbers from 1 to 9 appear, and also in every little square I should get all the numbers from 1 to 9. Okay, so that's the aim of this puzzle. And before, not all of these things have a solution, right? So before I give it to you, before you start wasting your time trying to solve this thing, I would like to prove to you that it has a solution. In fact, more likely, I would like to brag that I found a solution. Okay? So how can I brag to you that I found a solution to this puzzle without giving it away? Okay? And so here's a very nice approach. If I have some playing cards. So what I do is I'm going to put some cards on each little box. Okay? these cards are going to have the number that's supposed to be there, but they're facing down, right? So I put whatever's supposed to be there, I put whatever's supposed to be there, 3 cards on top of each other with exactly the same thing. And now I'll try to convince you that indeed these things are all the numbers 1 to 9. Okay? So we need to check that this line sums up, has all the numbers from 1 to 9, this thing has all to 9, and this has all to 9. So a very simple approach is I just open up the cards, right? Then you can check. That's not very good, right? Because then I gave it away. So what I do instead is I take, let's take this column, and I'm also going to add the cards that are public. The numbers are public. So 1, 4, 9, 8. I put it down there. 1, 4, 9, 8. Okay? And then I take now all the top cards and I push them down. Right? So presumably this should be everything from 1 to 9. Right?
But you're not removing the location.
Sorry?
You remove the location information.
I remove the location information, but they're here now. Can I just now flip it or reveal it? No, not good, right? So what should I do?
Shuffle, mix.
Yes, I just flip all of these things and I mix it around, and then I reveal it. And now we check that we got everything from 1 to 9. Right? And then I do the same thing to the right, and I do the same for the box.
But you still have the information you saw the group before, no? Like the other one saw the group. What's the point of it?
Again, you don't have information because I flipped these things around, and then in each of these things I shuffled it. So then I reveal it in a random order. And if this indeed is the order, the right numbers, then it's going to be a random permutation of 1 to 9. Because if I don't shuffle, when I reveal it again, then you have 1, 4, 9, 8, and then it says whatever that thing was.
Because there's still order, but you don't need to shuffle it with the open card. You already know the
I need to shuffle it with order. Right? I guess I don't need to. I need to shuffle these ones. Yeah, sure. Doesn't really matter. Okay, so does this work?
Yes.
No, it doesn't.
That's why you have 3.
horizontal and the vertical are correlated.
Exactly. It doesn't work because you still have, I might use different things like this and like that. And all the 3 things. So this only works if the 3 cards I have here are actually identical. Okay? So I'm not done yet. And I'm not going to tell you how to do it. I'll leave this for you guys to figure out. There's a trick for how to make sure that the 3 cards that are on top of each other are the same. Okay? There's a little trick that you can think about during the lunch break or whenever we're going to sleep. Okay. So since that thing is empty complete, we can now use this Sudoku thing to prove that this equation has a solution, right? Or for instance, that this number is a product of 2 primes. It's kind of amazing. So using playing cards, you can do it. Not very easy to go from one to another, but in principle, you can do it. Okay. So there is now a very rich theory of zero knowledge proofs, and as I said, we can prove essentially anything you want in zero knowledge. These examples I gave you were all kind of physical zero knowledge proofs. It required either a piece of paper or cards. So let me now give you an example of something much more realistic, which just uses communication and bits. Right? So here I would like to, this is one of the original zero knowledge proofs, and it's a proof for something called graph isomorphism. This is actually not an empty complete problem, but it's still a very fundamental problem. So I have 2 graphs. These are 2 big graphs, and I'd like to prove that these 2 graphs are isomorphic. Do you all know what it means to be isomorphic graphs? They're basically the same graph. I can take one graph and permute it to get the other graph. So I permute the nodes of this graph. I'll get the other one. Right? So just this graph is relabeling on that one. Now the point is, it's actually this task of figuring out if I can go from this graph to this graph is not easy. Right? It's not easy to figure out if such an isomorphism exists. It's not NP complete, but we don't believe this is an easy problem. Now, how can Alice prove to Bob that these two graphs are isomorphic? Okay. If she knows a way to relabel one graph to another, she can just tell Bob this relabeling, right? But that's not zero knowledge because she told him. She told him, right? So how can she do it? And this is how you can do it in zero knowledge. So let's say that Alice knows this isomorphism, this relabeling sigma. So sigma is a way to relabel G0 to G1. She's not going to give that away. Instead, what she does is that she picks a random permutation ρ0 that transforms this G0 to another randomly labeled version that we call H. She takes the left graph and relabels it in a random way to a graph H. Okay? And now of course, now she can also relabel G1 to H2, because if we can go from here to here, since she knows how to relabel there to there, she can just apply boom, boom to get this, right? Do you agree? If she knows this relabeling, she can also relabel like that or like that. Right? All right, so what she's going to do is she's going to take this graph, this randomly relabeled version of G0, which is also randomly relabeled version of G1, and sends that graph to Bob. Make sense? Takes this first graph, relabeled, sends this relabeled version to Bob. What Bob's going to do is going to ask her to, she's going to send a bit, either 0 or 1, and basically ask her to reveal how to go from G0 to H or G1 to H. So if he sends 0, then she needs to tell him how to go from G0 to H. And if she sends 1, tell him how to go from G1 to H. Okay? And he will accept if indeed the permutation she sent was good. Does it make sense? Yeah.
There's a 50% chance that you can lie, no?
Definitely, yes. So with 50% probability, so let's do this soundness proof to check, is this sound? Let's not do zero knowledge. Why is this sound? Well, first, let's show that she can convince him. Clearly, you know, if they're isomorphic, she will be able to answer both these things as we just argued, right? She can find this thing, so whatever challenge he sends, she will be able to respond. Okay? But now let's prove soundness. Let's assume that these two graphs are not isomorphic. She wants to lie. She takes two graphs, they're not isomorphic, they're different, and she wants to convince him that they are isomorphic. And then she just tries to guess whatever bit he's going to pick. Okay? She picks a random one, and she can still then permute a random one of these two things. In fact, even just permuting G0 with probability 1/2 will work, because he's going to ask for this thing and then she will open it. Right? So with probability 1/2, she will be able to cheat. But in fact, 1/2 is the exact probability she can cheat. Because if they're not isomorphic, she cannot be able to go from here to here and there to there, right? Because if she could go from here to here and there to there, then there is a way to go from here to there. By relabeling G0 to this and relabeling H to G1. So if they're not isomorphic, these two arrows cannot exist. So either it's like this or like that. Both cannot exist. Right? So with probability 1/2, Bob will actually catch her. Is that good? Good enough?
No.
Why not?
It's random. It's what do you call it? Math entropy.
I'm not sure.
Is there an example, a toy example with like various sets of numbers that you see what you know?
This is exactly 1/2. That's a simple number. 1/2. 1 and 2 are the simplest numbers.
So maybe because it's going to be 3/4, 1/2 a chance to pick the G0, and then on the other one to randomly pick one, and you're right. So you have 50% chance on one side of picking
let's pause here. So this is 1/2. If you're not happy with 1/2, let's do it again, okay? If you flip a coin 100 times, what's the probability you're going to get heads 100 times in a row? 2 to the minus 100, okay? It's a very, very small number, okay? So in this thing, you can cheat with probability 1/2. But you won't be able to cheat 100 times in a row. So that's the point. So you just repeat this 100 times, and if Alice will be able to, if it's true, she can always convince him. If it's false, the probability that she can convince Bob 100 times in a row is 2 to the minus 100. Okay? Probability 2 to the minus 100 is much more likely that you get hit by a car than this happening. Okay? Or that an airplane crashes. So we're pretty safe. Okay? And if you don't like 2 to the minus 100, repeat it 1,000 times. And at that point, you're sure that's like, yeah. Anything can happen is more likely than this going wrong.
Excuse me? So you described it as being similar to the Bernoulli trial, that you simply repeat this experiment.
Yeah.
But it doesn't feel right. You're really saying that you didn't add information.
No, I'm not talking about adding information. Here I'm just saying, if Alice convinces Bob, if Bob is accepting, should he be convinced? And what I'm saying is, yes, if this is false, the probability that she would be able to convince him while this being false is 2 to the minus 100 if you repeat it 100 times. And if you repeat it 1,000 times, the probability of this still being false, the probability of him being able to, her being able to cheat him is 2 to the minus 1,000. Tiny.
Absolutely no information gained.
No, there's no information. I haven't talked about information yet. Information is not, this is just some.
Yeah. She could just say yes or no without giving any information. There doesn't have to be any form of transferring anything between them. You just say yes or no. Yes or no. It's equivalent.
No, I'm not sure what to say. Yeah?
Control the randomness.
Yes, if the randomness is bad, all bets are off, right? This relies on Bob being able to toss truly random bits. Very good point, yeah.
Just to be sure I understood, at every instance when you're doing it again and again, she is drawing a
new H, very important. Every time you do it, you have to do a completely new trial from everything. New randomness, new H, everything is all fresh. Very good. All right, so far we've only discussed whether this should convince Bob. Okay? Now let's argue whether this leaks any information. Is this zero knowledge or not? So that's the more interesting part. So the first question we have to ask ourselves is, what does it mean to be zero knowledge? What does it mean to not leak any information? And here is this beautiful definition by Goldwasser, Mikhail, and Rakov. And it says that an interaction between a prover and verifier leaks zero additional knowledge, zero additional information, if whatever the verifier sees when he's talking to the prover, he could have just generated on his own at home. Okay? No point talking to the prover. I could have stayed at home, I'd been asleep, and just dreamt up this whole beautiful conversation. Right? So what does that mean? That there exists some simulator that could have just simulated this whole view. Everything I see, I could have simulated. Okay? I'm oversimplifying a little bit. This requires some more detail to formalize, but this really is intuition. Whatever I saw when I talked to the prover, I could have simulated on my own. And now, since we're talking about computational problems, it's important that this simulation actually is efficient. So the way we formalize that is to saying that anything a polynomially bounded verifier can learn, whatever he sees in his interaction, could have been simulated in probabilistic polynomial time, that's PPT. So this is simulated PPT that in probabilistic polynomial time is able to generate this whole view, whatever I see. Questions? I saw something there? Yeah? I don't want to. I can, but if you... Okay. Anything else? Only on slides in the future, this one or in the future. But all right, so this is the definition. And now let's see on a high level what such a simulator, why this actually doesn't reveal any information or zero knowledge, right? So intuitively, why is this zero knowledge? Because the only thing Alice gave to Bob was this randomly permuted version of a graph and how to get from G0 and G1 to that graph, right? Is that something that Bob could have conjured up in his head? How does he do it? Yeah, like he has these two graphs, he picks a random one of them. He thinks like this, look, I know what question I'm going to ask, right? I'm going to ask for the bit 1. If so, let me just take a random permutation of G1. Well, now I call him G1, sorry. Let's assume that 1 is 0 and whatever. Okay, he thinks of the left one here. I'm going to ask for that. So let me take a random permutation of that and do this. Okay? And from it to 1/2, he just thinks, you know what, otherwise I would have asked for this. Then let me permute that and generate this random graph, and that's that. And so that's exactly what you will see in this interaction. No point in talking to this annoying prover. Just imagine this whole thing in my head. So that's why this thing actually does not convey any knowledge, because anything I learned, I could have just simulated in my head. All right. Excellent. Now it was in the future.
I'm trying to understand what you're trying to prove there, because by the definition of isomorphism, you have to show that going from G1 to G2 and back from G2 to G1 is the identity morphism on G1.
I'm trying to just show, I'm trying to show that there is a way to go from this thing to this. I can permute this graph into this.
That's
if I apply,
isomorphism.
yes. Isomorphism means that there is a way to relabel G1 to G2. If I label G1 to G2, I can relabel G2 to G1.
That's not the isomorphism. And I'm trying to understand what you're proving here.
I'm proving that these two graphs, I want to prove that these two graphs are isomorphic. What it means for them to be isomorphic is that can I apply a permutation to the label? Can I relabel the nodes? Such that if I do that, I get the second graph. Okay? And that's what the original sigma was. Sigma was this, a way to go from this guy to this guy. And I don't want to reveal it. All right, so zero-knowledge proofs have lots and lots of application. Probably the most commonly used application of this thing is sometimes when we do authentication schemes on the internet. This is done using zero-knowledge proofs or variants of them. And what I'm going to talk about now is another application to survey systems, and this is something that we implemented a few years ago, and that's called Anonize. So let's first introduce the problem, and then tell you a little bit about what the solution is. So surveys, we do them all the time. So at the university, we do them for course evaluations. For every class we're taking, you need to submit a survey about how good the professor was. And what we want here, we want to make sure that only the students in the class are actually submitting it, and they can only submit one response. Right? You don't want a whiny student that really hated your class to submit 10 different responses describing how he hated you. Medical surveys, employees, and so on and so forth. This happens in a lot of different situations. And more of these surveys are today becoming really large scale. So Apple, a year and a half ago, released this health kit to enable these health surveys on your cell phone, and it's used for lots of different very nice things to measure various of your health properties in order to better diagnose diseases. So let's now take course evaluations as a running example, because it's going to be the easiest to think of one particular thing, but everything I talked about can be used for the others, of course. So what are two things that you really want from most surveys? Well, the first one is authenticity. And that's that you only want authorized users to actually submit a response to this thing. Okay? That's, as we mentioned in course surveys, it's very important you only want the students in the class to submit it. But it's equally important actually in Apple's HealthKit application, because you don't want some spammer could just ruin all the data by submitting a bunch of bad responses. That would just ruin the whole health application. Okay? So only authorized users, and it should only be able to submit once. Okay? Otherwise, we just get unreliable responses, right? So that's a given. The second thing is we want anonymity, typically, right? And what that means is that we don't want the particular user's responses to be traced back to the user. Right? I should not find out who said what. And I would argue otherwise, you also get unreliable answers because people might not tell the truth if they know that what they write can be traced back to them. And perhaps, even more importantly, it really, I would argue, is unethical, especially in health surveys. If this link between the users and responses is there, even if it's a very responsible person that keeps all his data, you know, what happens when somebody buys that company and then uses that data for something less good? You know, it really is unethical if this link would be there. So we'd like to have these two things. But they seem kind of contradictory, right? How can we have authenticity and anonymity at the same time? And so what do people do today? So today, you try to achieve them by relying on a trusted third party. The most common such trusted third party today is this company called SurveyMonkey. They're very widely used. And so we just trust them to ensure authenticity and anonymity. So you create your survey with them, they collect the responses, and they promise to not reveal who said what to the survey collectors. But they have everything, right? Here's another slightly different version. This is actually how Cornell was doing it before. So you would, you have a survey, well, this is the most naive approach. I submit my response with my email and my response, and it's sitting behind some firewall, of course. And this is how Cornell did it to be a little better. They separated it. So I submitted my response with my email, and then they would store an email and a code to make sure I only do it once. And on a different computer, it's a code and a response. Okay? So is this a good solution?
No.
Why not?
If I have access to both computers.
Yeah, if you have access to both, then it's not so great. And then sometimes, you know, computers get old, and at that point you start selling them off. True story that happened. So somebody actually bought up a bunch of computers that Cornell had. It's not elaborate any further, but so it's not a great principle, okay? And indeed, usually things get hacked into, and this is just in the last few months, less in universities have gotten broken into.
Equifax.
Sorry?
Equifax.
Yeah, Equifax a few days ago. Anything, even like these security companies, and so on and so forth. So basically, hoping that if you store this data somewhere, that it doesn't get compromised is basically impossible to ensure, right? So the question is it unavoidable, right? Can we get anonymity and authenticity at the same time without a trusted third party, or do we just have to rely on this thing? And at first you would think that, you know, this sentence seems obvious, right? Unless I know who submits, how can I know that they are one of the people that's allowed to submit? Right? Just seems impossible to do it. I need to have some way to make sure that you're the one that's allowed to submit. And if so, then I need to, you know, I know that you submitted. So we would argue it's false, and indeed, zero knowledge is a way to overcome this apparent paradox. It's not a paradox, really. We can do it. And that's exactly what zero knowledge does. And on a high level, the idea is just that, yes, in a first step, I need to prove to you that I'm authorized. But later on, when I submit, I'm going to submit using a zero knowledge proof, show that I'm authorized. And that allows me to break this connection between who is allowed to submit and the submission. So the zero-knowledge proof will just show that I am one of the people that is authorized, but without actually giving it the link. All right. So this idea actually goes way back to this work of David Shom from '81. And the idea was, can we replace this specified party with cryptography? And his approach for cryptographic voting or surveys was the following. So users will authenticate themselves. They will prove that they log in with their email, they do some challenge response to show that they own this email. And after they've done this challenge response, they will check out some token. And this is like this anonymous token. Right? That's what it was called back then. Now you can think of, no way. I'll take 2 more minutes. All right, so they check out this anonymous token. And then later on, so this token, now you check that it can only be, one of them can be taken out. And then they can later on use this token to submit a response. So here, I'll hurry up a little bit here, it's how it's happened with a picture. So the first time, I send my email, I do some verification to check that this email is actually mine. Then I check out this token. This token cannot be linked back to me at all. And then whenever I want to submit my survey, I will submit my survey with this nice token. And now you can check that I'm one of the people that is allowed to do it, because they gave this coin, but this coin cannot be traced back to me. So that's a very nice solution. The problem is it's not very practical, unfortunately. The reason is that if you actually do this in practice, what users will do is that they will check out their token at 4 o'clock, and then they're going to submit the response a second or a minute later, right? Because that's how people do it. I need to go and get my token first, and then only when I have my token I can submit my response. Most people just do both at the same time. If you do both at the same time, then you have that, right? And you have this temporal link between them. So the only way this is secure is if I go and check out my token in the beginning, and then I have to wait for like a day or so before I submit my survey. And I do this for every survey I'm filling out. Nobody's going to do it.
What promises that this centralized entity does not keep any mapping of the legacy?
So this is done using some cool cryptography that you can actually not, this token, they actually don't see what it is. In this first part, they don't get it. So this has been around for a very long time, but didn't really take off because it's just not very practical. Every time I need to submit something, I need to get a new token for every response. Okay? So our new method is something we call an ad hoc survey instead, where we kind of separate it out into 2 different stages. So the first stage, you have this registration phase. In the registration phase, I'm going to authenticate myself, and I only do this once. So I authenticate myself with my email, and then I'm checking out this master token. Think of it as a stamp. Okay, or actually, what is that? You call a stamp? Whatever it is. Let me call it a stamp. Okay, so I check out this golden thing that allows me to think of it as minting new mints, new coins. Okay, so I do this only once. Then after this has happened, anyone can create a survey. They say, I would like you to participate in my survey. They do it by just sending a single message, I'm creating a survey, by just listing people's emails that are allowed to participate in this survey. And then users can on their own, at home, use their nice stamp to create this anonymous token, and they can use that token in order to submit in that survey, if they're authorized. So this coin that I'm generating here is going to be valid for this survey only if I'm one of the authorized users. But there's absolutely no link between this coin and my name. Okay, so the fact that I can only generate a single coin per survey, that gives you authenticity, and the other 2 things gives you anonymity. So again, let's do it with an example. So at first, I'm going to register with my email. I send my email. I get my stamp. That this is a stamp with respect to my email address. And then later on, anybody can now post various different surveys, and I can submit these surveys by generating my own token on my own. So registration just happens once in the beginning of time, and then I can on my own generate appropriate tokens, but I can only generate 1 token per survey on my own at home.
Is everyone getting the same stamp?
No, I'm getting a stamp that's for my name.
So how can I tell that the issuer of the stamp did not save it with my email?
So the thing is, maybe he saved this with your email, but what you're never getting the stamp. You are actually, when you're submitting your response, you're using your stamp to create this coin. And this coin is created in a way that's completely anonymous. So when you're submitting your response with a coin, this coin has no link between your name and the thing. But we do know that this coin, you can only generate 1 coin per token, per survey, and only to surveys you're authorized for.
Can I potentially cheat by creating several surveys and submitting and requiring 1 email per survey, and then I know who submitted, right, the token? Because there's only 1 person per survey, but it's the same survey. So
sure, okay. If I'm submitting, so clearly, if I'm submitting to a survey where there's only 1 user, then of course everybody knows there's only me there, right? So I need to make sure I'm submitting to a survey that would, the right survey. So we need to somehow agree on what the surveys are. That's a very good point, and in fact, this is a problem in real-life system that we often need to address. How do we know we're actually submitting to a survey that everybody else is submitting to? Because if nobody, if there's a survey just tailored for me, then of course we know it's me doing it, right? So, and for instance, you can do it with a blockchain. You're posting what the survey is on the blockchain, everybody knows what it is. It's the same problem as finding, what is the root block, what is the genesis block of a chain, right? We need to get that. Yeah?
Can someone copy this stamp?
This is, what do you mean copy the stamp? If my data gets broken into, then my stamp can be leaked, yeah, then it's bad. All right, I wanted to go over what the actual scheme was. I guess I don't have that much. 5 minutes, okay, I'll go over very fast, try to go over a high level, more or less what this is. I won't go into what the zero-knowledge proof is, but here is what it is. Listen, or if you don't want to see the crypto, you can phase out for a second. So what I do here, I submit my email, and I'm going to send a commitment to some string S. This is a seed, S. A seed to something that would be a pseudorandom function later on. Okay, so I just send this commitment to S. And then this guy, we call him the registration authority. The registration authority is just registering people's names. Okay, so think of it as a certificate authority. He's a registration authority. So he's signing this commitment and the email. Okay, and that's what he sends back to me. Then whenever somebody wants to create a survey, anybody can do it. We call somebody who wants to create a survey voting authority, VA. The only thing he does is he's going to sign the ID of the survey and the email of somebody who's allowed to participate. And for every participant, he just signs ID and participant email. Boom, 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 boom. That's it. So whenever I create a survey, I just sign the emails of everybody that's allowed to participate, concatenated with the ID of the survey, the name of the survey. Okay? Now, what does it mean to mint this coin? This coin is just going to be a PRF, a pseudorandom function, applied to the survey ID. But the pseudorandom function I'm going to use is with respect to the seed that I committed to. So I committed to a seed that's been saved from me. That was this stamp I have. And I'm computing this PRF on this thing. And that's going to generate a random serial number. Think like, just exactly like in Zcash. Okay. Now, I need to, of course, prove that I did this correctly. I need to do it with respect to somebody who's authorized. So I need to give a zero-knowledge proof that this is done correctly. And how do I do that? Well, I'm going to show that, in fact, I have some signatures on, first of all, on a commitment with respect to some email, and a signature from that guy with respect to the same email. So to prove that I'm authorized, and then I'm then using a seed that is corresponding to this thing. I don't have that much time, but basically that's what I'm doing. Now the whole point is to come up with a zero-knowledge proof for this complicated statement. I won't go into detail, you can do it, and we designed this very specialized and highly optimized zero-knowledge proof for this particular statement. And it's running, and it's very fast, so it's online. If you go to anonize.org, you can download this app, and you can do your own surveys there if you want. So here is how it goes. You download this app, you start by registering your email. There. What happens? We made mistakes. Okay. You register, you get the verification code sent to your email, you put it in, then you create a credential. Then whenever you want to submit a survey, you can do it either on the phone or you can do it on the web and scan the code. Now this is generated zero-knowledge proof, it just happened there, that was it, okay? So this was actually a live video of it happening. It's running, this was on a 3-year-old cell phone, so these zero-knowledge proofs are instantaneous basically, right? And this was everything with the communication and everything too, and so on. So we've been using this at Cornell for course evaluations for the last few years, and recently I wanted to end with another application that's been happening in the last 6 months or so. This new browser called the Brave browser has started using this for anonymous collection of web statistics. So let me in the last 2 minutes tell you what this is. So Brave is this new browser. I don't know if you have heard of it. It's created by Brendan Eich, who previously was one of the founders of Mozilla. And it's a new browser, and the goal is they want to remove ads. So they're removing all the ads, but then that doesn't make the content providers, the website providers, very happy, because now they don't get any money revenue. So they would like to pay the content providers based on how many people go to those web pages, right? So if the New York Times gets a lot of audience, they should get paid proportionally. So how do they do it? Well, they're asking users to pay something if you want. I don't know the exact number. At some point it was $5, maybe it's more, maybe it's less now. But let's just say $5 for now. So users pay $5 a month to use this browser if you want to. They don't have to pay, but if you want to. And then among the people that pay, we like to distribute that money among the websites that we visit. Now, Brave is a lot about respecting the privacy of the users. So how can you do it? Because one approach would be to just submit to Brave all the websites I'm going to, but that's not great, because then I'm revealing everything that I do. So how can we do it? Well, one approach would be to just use Anonize to anonymously submit all the websites you go to. Is this good? Sorry? Well, I'm doing it with Anonize. I'm submitting anonymously. So I'm authorizing all the people that have done payments. They're the authorized ones. And, sorry?
You have the history relations.
Yeah, this is not very good, because of course, even if it's submitted anonymously, the response itself is revealing a lot of stuff, because I go to my web page and then I go to this other web page that's not so good. Then you know that if I'm spending, this guy that spent a lot of time on Rafael's web page is likely to be Rafael, right? So just even if you submit things anonymously, the response itself can leak a lot of things about you. So that's a very dangerous thing. Furthermore, they also want to spend, they don't want to just release the websites I go to, they also want to submit them together with some attention score based on roughly how many minutes you spend on the website. So that gives you even more information, right? And based on this information, you can profile various different things. So that even just having some way of submitting responses anonymously doesn't really solve the problem itself. So the way we did this thing, and the way they implemented it, was we use Anonize to have a daily survey. So every day, and I don't know if they actually do it on day or not, because what they actually did is their proprietary information, but this is what we suggested, was you have a daily survey, and all the users are paid or authorized to submit. And now, what people do is a user submits a random website that they have been visiting, weighted according to Canada's attention score. So in each survey, I will just submit a random website weighted according to the right attention statistics. And now, since these submissions are completely unlinkable between them, I'm not revealing anything about myself. All right, so he's asking me to stop, and the key point is, even though I'm just submitting one thing, in aggregate, if you have a lot of users, this will get you very close to the right statistics, and you can show this very easily using Terraform. So the conclusion here is that authenticity and anonymity can be combined, even though it seems like kind of contradictory notions. You can get very, very practical zero-knowledge proofs for specialized, for special purpose, special purpose zero-knowledge proofs, and indeed the one we did is running extremely fast. Although I do believe that these general purpose things will also be very practical very shortly, but at least in the short term, doing the specialized ones seems to go very well. Zero knowledge is extremely powerful, and it can be done to a lot of great things, but it's not a panacea, and it just doesn't, even if you use zero knowledge, the statement you're proving, and in this particular case, the message you're submitting, might also reveal things. So just using zero knowledge does not guarantee that everything is going to be anonymous. Right? So as you saw in this Anonize application, there's a right way of doing it, and there's a wrong way. And the naive approach, even though it uses zero knowledge and everything, reveals that. So just using it doesn't solve all the problems. You still need to be very careful on how you use it. Thank you.